What's up out there? How you doing? Jeff D with the Talent Opportunity Connector with your talent tip of the week. So this week what I'd like to talk about is why storytelling is one of the most powerful interview skills for job candidates. So unfortunately today, candidates, when they prepare for interviews, they start memorizing answers. They'll memorize their resume, they'll memorize the job description, they'll memorize some of the features they see on the company's website, and they get very nervous because what happens is they're afraid that they forget something important. And at the end of the day, what is really most important for a candidate is to be truly memorable. And how to be memorable is to be a storyteller. Hiring managers don't just hire on experience, they hire on confidence. If you're confident in yourself, you have problem solving, leadership, and results. And stories usually bring those results there. So why does it really matter? Like I said, stories make you memorable. If you walk in the door, let's say an interview team interviewed 5 candidates today. The key is for you to be the most memorable candidate of those 5. Are you a great communicator? Are you a strong leader? Are you a problem solver? Tell stories behind that. Just don't say something like, I'm great at X. Tell a story behind why you're great at X. It's going to help you because you want to showcase your results. You want to, because stories demonstrate real experience. You're not going to say, I'm great with people. Great. That's awesome. A lot of people are great at people. Tell a story why. Tell a story of a situation where you really contributed to somebody else's success. Right? Well, stories also showcase results. A story demonstrates, some of the challenges you face, the actions you took, the impact you made, the lessons you learned. Employers want that proof that you could deliver results, not just promises. The worst thing you do is overpromise, right? But you want a story behind that. Stories always create an emotional connection. Have you ever heard a story that you're just like taken aback, like, wow, wow? You want to be a wow person because hiring decisions are not always made on qualifications. And I'll tell you, as a recruiter, some of the most qualified candidates don't get past the first interview, and sometimes the least qualified candidates, because there is a connection, an emotional connection or a connection, they go further in the interview process. So they interviewers want somebody that they can trust to work with and envision on their team, and you have to have that click. Stories highlight problem solving, skills. Hiring managers want candidates who can navigate obstacles and find solutions. They don't want candidates that are going to go to their boss and say, "Hey, I need help," all the time. They have a challenge, have a solution. Share some examples of overcoming some difficult situations that you demonstrate that your resiliency, adaptability, and critical thinking. Speaking of credibility, stories build credibility. A candidate can clearly explain a real world situation in their role appears more credible and authentic, right? You want to be a leader someday. Stories reveal leadership potential, right? You don't need to be a manager to tell leadership stories. You could have been a leader in any situation. It could have been even, as a volunteer or at a nonprofit or running a team, a sports team. It could be anything. If you show that you're taking initiative, influencing others, solving team challenges, and driving change, that will definitely demonstrate some great leadership qualities for you. So always take a STAR approach, the STAR method, situation, task, action, result. What was the situation? What happened? What was happening? The task, what responsibility did you have? And what action did you take? And then what was the result of that action? The structure keeps those stories focused and engaged. So always remember situation, task, action, result, the STAR method. Interview questions that need stories. So you should always prepare stories for any major accomplishment. Always have your accomplishments on your resume and your LinkedIn profile, not your job description. Did you solve a difficult challenge? Did you have a leadership experience? Did you have a conflict with a coworker? How did you solve that? Did you have a project failure? What did you learn from that? A time when you improved the process. a customer success story, especially if you're an account manager, managing accounts and you did a great upsell. A situation that required adaptability when you had to adapt to change. After all, we always have to adapt to change, right? So, a lot of these, having stories ready allow candidates to answer a wide range of behavioral interview questions. So, final thoughts here. Best interviewers are not uh, they're not readers of their resume. They're conversationalists, right? Built around experiences and outcomes. You have to master the storytelling transformation for you to take be able to set yourself apart from others. Now, of course, one last tip I have for storytellers: keep them pointed and to the short. Do not be a long-winded interviewer. If you're a long-winded interviewer, you're going to lose it, right? So what you want to do, in addition to having a pointed story, prepare 5 or 7 of them before an interview. Focus on your achievements, not your job duties. Quantify your results whenever possible. Use that STAR approach, the STAR method we mentioned earlier. And then we talked about short stories. Practice telling stories out loud. Don't go too crazy in the mirror, but maybe you're at a networking event or with a friend. Maybe practice your stories there. And then always tailor those stories to the particular role. If you go off on a tangent, you're going to lose the interviewer, right? Always show technical skills and soft skills. And of course, end every story with a positive business impact, right? The old saying is facts tell, stories sell. That's a classic sales approach. And after all, as a candidate, you're interviewing for a job, you're selling yourself. Have a good day. Jeff D., the Talent Opportunity Connector.